Welcome to In Your Right Mind, a weekly discussion of behavioral health issues that affect our lives. We all have issues, so let's start talking. Good evening, and thank you for joining us on In Your Right Mind. My name is Christina Kustner.
And I'm Dr. Tanmoy Sharma. We're still in the month of February, which many recognize as the month of love. And for those in relationships, hopefully your Valentine's Day went well. How about you, Christina? How did your Valentine's Day go?
It was actually pretty sweet, so thank you. How about yours, Dr. Sharma?
Oh, it went fabulous.
Well, as you may know, last week we discussed the difference between love and lust. So this week, we're staying on the topic of relationships, but this time focusing on what makes a successful relationship and what happens when love goes south, when the relationship turns toxic.
So to discuss these important issues with us, we have two very renowned people. One, the first one is Michele Hahn, a licensed psychotherapist, and we also have Dr. Michael Smalley, a nationally renowned marriage consultant. They're both on the line. Thank you both for joining us.
So
Thank you.
Yes, well, let's first hear about the good news. When things are going great for a couple. Ms. Hahn, can you tell me what that looks like in a relationship?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me on today. When a couple is doing well and things are looking good, what you're seeing is two people who are turning toward one another, who are looking toward each other for encouragement, who are noticing and appreciating what the other brings to the relationship. You're seeing sort of a mutual acceptance.
So are there any physical signs that one should be looking out for?
Absolutely. So when a couple is doing well, as I said, their body language is showing a turning toward. It can be in the eyes. It can be in the face. It can be a relaxed body posture. It can be with touching, even in just a relaxed environment. Sometimes their bodies even mimic one another as if to be just so comfortable with each other that they feel each other's presence, and there's no pretense there. There's no stiffness. There's no rigidity.
So it's funny because even, with my significant other, we've discussed if either of us won the lottery, who would we tell? And of course, I mean, one of them would be, trusting each other, right? So, of course, I told him that he would be one of the people I would tell, only the select few, right? So.
What happens when a relationship goes sideways, when things are not working out? What are the early signs? And obviously we'll come to how we deal with it. How does one recognize it?
Yeah, and it's actually, I believe, a universal pattern for broken relationships is something my wife and I wrote in our latest book, Reignite Your Marriage, in 2 days. Is this thing we call the conflict dance. And so when a relationship goes south, what happens is people are getting their buttons pushed, right? So they're feeling rejected, they're feeling controlled, they're feeling like a failure, and then they react to that button being pushed. But the problem for a toxic or dysfunctional or hurtful relationship, or one that's going south, is that the reaction to that feeling of rejection is negative. So they have a negative reaction. Maybe they shut down. Maybe they escalate, start yelling and screaming. Maybe they start making threats like, I want a divorce, or I never should have married you. Or they simply just negative believe each other to death, right? It's like they don't even give their partner the chance to succeed. And so what happens, and what this cycle is, this conflict dance, is my button gets pushed. I react negatively. And then if I react negatively, I am always going to push a button now in my spouse. So, for example, if I shut down because my wife escalated, or maybe I felt like a failure, and so I shut down and I stopped talking to her, well, she's probably going to start feeling ignored. And then the cycle completes itself with her reaction. And if she reacts negatively like I did, then that cycle is what spirals out of control for relationships and it's really what leads to divorce or breaking up or cutting off people from your life.
Ms. Hahn, your thoughts on a relationship going sideways? What are the signs and your experience?
Sure. And I agree with the cycle that Dr. Smalley is talking about. I see that in my couples therapy sessions a lot, where one's buttons are pushed. And it's important when you're in therapy to understand what your buttons are. See, a lot of people know that their buttons are getting pushed, but I usually like to go in and look at the why, kind of delve down into even childhood wounds, because a lot of the time we're trying to heal ourselves through our relationships. So we tend to get our buttons pushed, but we don't know why. So once we find out the why, what could be happening, what are some negative self-beliefs that we've been carrying inside of our own head, then we can address them. And then we can notice when we're showing a lack of empathy, or we're being overly critical, or our partner is suddenly being deceitful or shifty or inconsistent. These are signs that something's wrong in the relationship. When you see someone all take and no give, or when someone's starting to criticize or showing contempt, these are signs that things are going very, very bad in a relationship. And it does spiral out of control because then it triggers the insecurities and the wounds in each other and sends you down divorce court. So the best case scenario would be to get into some type of couples counseling or education program where you can start to learn what it is that you haven't healed within yourself, which actually goes back to the original question you asked about loving yourself. Loving yourself is just more or less being familiar with yourself. Not that you're in love with yourself or you think you're the greatest person in the world, but there's something about knowing your quirks and your needs and your unique challenges that if you can communicate that to your spouse or be in a couples therapy situation where it's exposed and each one then gains some level of empathy, then we start to grow the relationship and the level of understanding and curiosity takes the place of ridicule, contempt, sarcasm, stonewalling, which are some of the most common things that happen in that cycle or spiral downward. So it's really important to have that awareness.
So when one is in a long-term relationship, whether it's a marriage or otherwise, and it's a long-term committed relationship, they after a number of years, say 10, 20 years, there is sometimes a feeling that one gets disconnected from the significant other. What are the circumstances under which that happens, and what does one do about that? The oomph goes out of that relationship,
right?
And what does one do?
I love you, but I'm not in love with you, kind of feeling, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, I'll address that. I believe it comes with unrealistic expectations. So you fall in love with someone and you have that euphoria, and you kind of go into it if you haven't set up proper expectations. And you're expecting this high level of love and attention to continue. And when it starts to be taken over by household chores or the demands of a busy life, or then when you bring in children or elderly parents, you get distracted from one another. And then that infatuation, euphoria feeling is long gone. And the expectation is now I'm disillusioned, now I'm disappointed, now I'm not important to my partner. And when you start going down that negative self-talk, it starts to disconnect couples rather than reuniting and realizing realistically, look, we're in a partnership. We have to work together with all the things that life are throwing us. We're a team. We may not be in that teenage love state, but the appreciation that I have you to stand by my side and help me battle these life-crushing crises is so appreciated. So it's to look at what the marriage means and how to bring forth what it's giving to you and what you're able to give to your partner rather than what I don't have. Because naturally it's going to change over time. Think about you as a person. You change over time. So it's being realistic and realizing different ways to connect and different ways to appreciate the other.
For those of you who may have joined us recently, you're listening to In Your Right Mind on Talk Radio 790. Miss Hahn, what about your thoughts?
Yeah, we do have different expectations based on our gender roles. Women do have an expectation that they'll be safe, that they can bring to their husband their worries, their fears, their insecurities, and that they'll be met with some level of, I'm there for you, I've got your back, I understand you. And I think men tend to want, you're right, lovemaking is important. It tends to harmonize the relationship and release certain chemicals. And men do speak a lot through their bodies, through the physical. And so men do tend to have an expectation that there will be a physicality. A lot of women don't realize the value of sex in their relationship. And they may not be in the mood because women tend to be slower starters. But eventually, if they catch on to this release of great chemicals, and it's almost like exercise and can bring a lot into the relationship. So it's sort of recognizing what each one wants from the other, then also coming together to try to harmonize and collaborate so that we each get our needs met, and we each do have some expectations, either through society or through, like Dr. Smalley wanted to be a husband from childhood, which is unusual for a man, but it is something that is placed on us from a very early age, and being aware of what we want, even as a single person. What do we need from ourselves? What are our expectations? We can only expect from someone else truly what we can expect from ourselves. And you can't control other people. So wanting someone else to make you a better person usually doesn't work that way. You have to work on yourself and expect from yourself certain things, like the law of attraction says. So when I build myself up and I'm finally this confident, witty, articulate person, I can then attract and want similar traits in a man. So it is about learning to know yourself and to love yourself or accept yourself.
So I don't know whether it was
expectations.
Sorry, I'm not sure whether it was Wordsworth or Shakespeare that had said that our reality always falls short of our expectation. I'm just wondering whether this applies to the situation that we are discussing, which is, should we be tempering our expectations in the relationships that or in the relationship that one is in as one goes through it, or once that initial euphoria or that honeymoon period is over? Or does one have to do that? Should we? I mean, can I take the contrarian view that, okay, do you have to dumb it down so much that to succeed you have to have really low expectations of your partner?
Yeah, keep the high expectations, right?
And so, do we have to say, okay, this person is a loser, and so if I go, this will be another loser over there?
Or do you need a compromise in a sense, and obviously lower the expectations?
And like we make relationships sound like this is climbing Mount Everest. This is really hard work. So, oh God, coming from a job, and then I have to work at home as well. Is there like a brighter side to this? Is there something that, do we really have to lower our expectations so much, or there is I'm not talking about unusually high expectations, but is there some middle ground? So maybe Ms. Hahn will let you go first, and then I'm sure Dr. Small will have some things to talk about.
Absolutely. I think there's something about the word expectation, that there's already some sort of setup, right, for disappointment or disillusionment. So I like to tell my couples it's about accepting what is. Often we come into a relationship expecting our partner to have certain traits. And the truth is, by accepting who they are with their faults and having an expectation about our marriage versus an expectation about that person. My person, as well as myself, we have faults, and we're going to accept each other as we are. The expectation would be that we're always going to be working toward a common goal, toward a happy marriage, toward a harmonious marriage. And in times that are rough and when we're disagreeing, that we don't turn away from each other, that our common goal, this marriage, this commitment, is what keeps us moving forward and turning toward each other rather than away from each other. So I don't know if it's an expectation on the person as much as maybe setting up sort of some ground rules and goals for our union. And by working within that paradigm, we're not really setting ourselves up to be disappointed by the other, because we are all flawed. We are all works in progress. And the more acceptance and being good enough, we don't have to be perfect. I often tell my parents who come in for therapy, being a good enough parent is just fine. Being a good enough spouse, as long as you're putting into it, as long as you're respecting, showing curiosity, having playfulness, encouraging the other. As long as those tenets are in place, then the expectations, will go up and down, but it keeps us in line with our goal. And accepting the other for who they are is really what helps to move this whole ship forward.
Dr. Smalley, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I certainly don't get stressed out about expectations per se. Where they tend to cause problems is when they're unrealistic or unfair or ridiculous, right? Like, well, my expectation is that my wife will never hurt my feelings. Obviously, that's not healthy because that's clearly impossible. It's going to happen. But I also believe that we do teach people how to treat us. And I think that's where expectations can be helpful, is that, hey, listen, I'm a valuable person, and I deserve to be treated in an honoring way. And so these are some of the expectations I have on being treated well or being loved well. And those are good, but ultimately it comes down to what am I going to be doing, right? I just feel like too many people want to point the finger at the other person and say, you're the problem, you're the reason, when the truth is the one common denominator in all of my failed relationships is me. I'm the problem. I have issues.
So we need to look at ourselves.
We do.
Okay. So the issue is maybe we just need to temper our expectations rather than have none at all, because it'll be terrible not to have any. It'll be like an insipid relationship if there was no oomph in this whatsoever.
Yeah, it almost feels like it would become apathetic. If I have no expectations, then do I even care?
Yeah.
I could argue that maybe I don't. So it's not expectations. It's, are they out of balance? Are they unfair? And what are the healthy ones that I can set up? And Michele, you pointed out something that was so huge that I preach all over the place on. Be a lifelong learner. That would be my expectation that's healthy, is I want to be married, and my wife is. I wanted my spouse, and when I was a single person, I even knew that was important, is I wanted to marry someone who wanted to grow, who wanted to learn, who loves to read, who wants to go to the training or to this seminar, to that event, because they know I don't know everything and I want to be better. And when we have that attitude, it trickles down to everything, all of our relationships.
Now, unfortunately, many of us experience toxic ones, and we've looked at what it takes for a successful relationship and unveiled the different expectations in a relationship.
To break down this topic, we have Ms. Michele Hahn and Dr. Michael Smalley. The next question, I think, is one that our listeners would be quite interested in hearing the answer to. When do you know that somebody is the right one for you? So, Ms. Hahn, do you want to go first on this? How do I know this is the right person?
Sure. Well, we've heard on this show very, very different approaches to relationships, from an arranged marriage, as in your parents, to Dr. Smalley, who says he can take any two people and make the marriage work. I have more of a sense of there is a gut feeling, because we do have a connection between our gut and our mind. So our bodies don't lie. When we initially meet someone, there is that initial attraction, that feeling. And then when we carry on through our relationship and we get a sense that we can trust and respect and feel accepted, it finally all clicks. And what I like to equate it to is the feeling of being home. That is what my most successful couples relay to me in therapy when they first met, is that they had a feeling that they were at home with each other. That's when you have a sense that something here is really worth working on, sticking with, finding out where we've gone wrong or where we've gone astray, and try to pull it back, because that's not an everyday feeling. Because most of the time you meet someone and you have either a gut reaction that you're not going to get along, or they're okay but at a distance, or there's some kind of thing off with this person. Granted, we're not going to be 100% compatible. We talked about that. There's no way where each person is like a snowflake. Everyone is different in their own beautiful way. But if we have that feeling of being at home, we can develop and grow and learn ways to speak each other's language of love and to grow together to satisfy each other's deep, innate needs. And that's when we know we're with the one, is when we feel at home with them.
It's funny because my mom, when she was first dating my father, she was saying how the moment she knew that he was the one was when she realized that, you know what, I would like to have his kids. I could handle little ones that were just like him. What are your thoughts on that? Is that kind of...
Absolutely. When you have that feeling of wanting to bond and merge and procreate, there's something chemical going on within our bodies that are letting us know this person might be good to help my species succeed and to carry on. Our bodies are so informed, way ahead of our minds. So she had actually a sense within her that to procreate with this man would make sense, would be good for me. I would feel protected. We would be able to produce together. And a lot of times people can't articulate it, but they get a strong feeling that this is the person that we want to connect with and attach to and build our life with. And look what she did, Christina.
Yeah. Yes, Ms. Hahn and Dr. Smalley, thank you both very much for joining us. If you'd actually like to hear more from our guest speakers, check out our guest Q&A page on our website, www.inyourrightmind.com.